This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to a podcast. Sorry, I got stuck at the thing there. A podcast of rare antiquities. Episode number 47. On the show today, we again travel to Canada for our second Canadian production, the 2008 production Pontypool. I am your host, Jeff.
Is there some kind of quantum singularity that's happening in your living room, or it's like it's like this echo?
Yeah, it's going back and forth, and time has no meaning here. Past and present collide.
How's it going, man?
Well, I'll tell you how it's going, man. I'm crammed into a small bedroom with my computer on a dresser and a basement, and it's fucking fantastic. How the heck are you?
Well, I'm got my laptop on my bed and almost in the same situation, a cramped room, and got some beverage in my hand here, and I'm ready to roll.
Well, hey, thank goodness for the beverage. So that makes it all okay.
A couple hours of talking to you, yeah. And I'm sure you need it as well.
I need it. 100%. Yeah, so let's jump in. It's been a while since we've done the show, man. So it's good to be back for sure. So I'm going to assume you had never heard of this film before.
No, not at all. And I was frankly surprised at the genre pick that you had. I think September at the time when you announced that this was what we were going to do.
Yeah.
So I guess that was appropriate based on the Halloween date, seasonal date. But I was shocked that this is something that you would have picked, but it was a pleasant surprise in that
I'm not a big horror guy, but I do have a softness for the zombie genre for some reason.
Why is that? So I wanted to ask you one thing. Did you search out this particular one because it was a zombie genre, or it was something another Canadian flick you were looking for in particular, or what led you to pick this particular?
There is a podcast that I listen to, and occasionally, I know, I just listen to it so I can steal funny jokes. So every now and then he'll mention like a movie or something that he's seen, and the guy's a big horror movie buff. So most of the movies that he watches, I don't bother checking out, but he talked about this. He actually had a couple of neat picks, which I'm going to research out. But he said something about a zombie movie that takes place in a small Ontario town on the radio, and there's reports of this zombie horde keeps getting closer and closer. I'm like, that sounds really cool.
It sounds like Maple Leaf fans.
Yeah, it does sound like Maple Leaf fans, exactly. So that's where it came from. So I looked it up, and then like right after I'd heard that on the podcast, I just noticed it on my Amazon Prime, and I was like, oh, what a fortunate coincidence. So decided to work it in as my Halloween pick. Halloween being 6 weeks in the rearview mirror here, or maybe not quite that long, but that's okay. But this will be ready for Halloween 2028.
The way we were going, oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's where it came from. And I know we did Bon Cop, Bad Cop. I don't have a huge love for Canadian cinema. It's certainly not. I think we had this conversation during that episode, but a big budget film isn't really a thing here. I mean, Canada's kind of coming around in the television area, but film just hasn't really taken hold here. I mean, obviously proximity to Hollywood and many Hollywood films being filmed in Canada probably takes up all that talent pool, and the money's not there. So it's kind of neat to see something that's, for lack of a better term, a little bit more mainstream, but still has a little bit of Canadian flavor to it.
So I guess, how about then genre? I mean, based on the genre, zombie movies, what's your favorite? Can I venture the guess?
You may venture a guess.
Shaun of the Dead?
I do love that movie. I think that is terrific. My favorite zombie movie, I don't know. I am a really big fan of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. I think that was kind of might have been the first big budget zombie movie that I had seen.
First? Really?
I think so. It might have been that. It might have been 28 Days Later, but I think they were kind of contemporary. They were in the same neighborhood as far as when they came out. So it might have been one of those. But yeah, I'd never seen Night of the Living Dead or the original Dawn of the Dead or any of that stuff. And I think the zombie genre craze kind of started in and around the Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. And it might have been 28 Days Later that sort of kicked things off sort of into the mainstream. And it's still going.
Yeah.
For better. Well, there's still good stuff out there, and there's some garbage out there, and it's definitely, it's played out, but I don't know, man. There's something about zombies as an antagonist that you can really do a lot with in a movie. You get a smart filmmaker Like, there's some really good zombie movies out
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, for myself, Dawn of the Dead is one of the ones I really love. I also love Night of the Living Dead. I'm also partial to Zombieland as well.
there. Yeah, Zombieland. That's a fun one.
But it's a bit of a different take. It's not really a zombie movie in a sense. It's about relationships and it's more of a comedy. But yes, outside of those, I'm not huge. There's another one I had some friends over and watched a few years back. There was another one it wasn't Romero, but it was an Italian movie. I think it was just called Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty fucking amazing. In that one, you actually see a stuntman dressed in full zombie gear and makeup take a bite out of a shark. Live shark.
Holy shit. A live shark.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was fucking awesome.
One of the things that I get away with in places like Italy, for example, that's insane.
Yeah. But that one was not just because of that scene, but very well filmed, and it was eerie and spooky and kind of right up what I like to see in a zombie movie. I do like 28 Days Later. That's also a good one. And I remember watching Zack Snyder's, what was it called?
Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead, yeah. It was okay. It wasn't a bad movie. You could argue that's one of Zack Snyder's better movies, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's one of his better films. Definitely.
Films.
I think he's unfairly maligned, but he's also fairly maligned as well. Like, I get it, but that's a topic for another. Wow, hey, we've done Zack Snyder films on the show before, so but that might be for another conversation.
Yes.
All right, why don't we jump into this frozen wasteland that is Pontypool?
Sure, why don't you hit us up with plot summary?
Let's do it. All right. Grant Mazzy is probably freezing his balls off. Maybe that's why he fires his agent on the way to work in the middle of a blizzard. Mazzy's a radio host in the small town of Pontypool, Ontario. That's Canada, for those of you who don't know. This is clearly a step down from the big time for Grant, one he's none too happy with. His crew, producer Sidney Breyer and technical assistant Laurel Ann Drummond, seem pleasant enough. Laurel Ann makes sure he has his morning whiskey, and Sidney, well, she brews the coffee and strokes his ego. As the trio settles in for what should be just another day in small town Ontario, news reports start coming in over the wire. Strange reports. First, a potential hostage scenario, then a riot downtown at the offices of one Dr. John Mendez. The station's traffic reporter, Ken Loney, who's on site at the riot, reports some strange goings-on. He reports that the building just explodes outward with people. And before you know it, armored vehicles and helicopters are on the scene, almost like they were already on their way. Eyewitnesses sporadically call in strange reports, like a family trapped in a car under a swarm of people and a herd of folks carrying around a missing cat poster. When they get Ken back on the air, he's taken refuge in a grain silo, and what he sees outside is unsettling, to say the least. A group of people are torn out of their van by the rioters, who drag the group to the ground in their mouths. Ken's freaked out, and just as it sounds like he's about to get attacked, a strange transmission takes over the airwaves and broadcasts a transmission in French. Unable to make out the message, Laurel Ann sets translating it, which Grant reads out over the air. Tells everyone to stay inside, avoid talking to small children, good advice. No terms of endearment, better advice. No rhetorical discourse, best of all. And whatever you do, don't use the English language. Oh, and do not translate this message. Oops. I may be open with that one next time. Reporter Ken calls back in. He's still in the grain silo when his attacker seems to be immobilized. He recognizes him as a local kid, a teenage boy. His body is messed up and his hands have been severed, and he's murmuring in what sounds like a baby's voice calling for his mommy. Well, shit's just too weird for Mazzy now. It's time to GTFO, but an approaching herd of people and the violent blizzard force him to retreat back inside. Something strange is happening. The herd is repeating the shouts of Mazzy and Sidney, almost like a warped record player, and now they're trapped inside. Sidney and Laurel Ann are boiling some water, trying to relax in the eye of this storm, when Laurel Ann starts to act a little weird. She starts repeating the same phrase over and over again. Missing Mazzy, missing Mazzy. She's confused too, like her thoughts are getting twisted around in her head. The kettle whistles on the stove, but when Sidney takes it off the heat, the sound continues. Only it's not from the kettle. It's from Laurel Ann. She's repeating the sound, just as the herd outside had done. Now it's Dr. X Machina time. The basement window opens up and in crawls Dr. John Mendez. You remember the guy whose office had blown up in a mass of humanity earlier that morning. He introduces himself to Sidney, gets an earful of Laurel Ann's kettle whistle, and hustles Sidney into the sound booth with Grant. His opinion is that Laurel Ann is not going to be okay. In the booth, Dr. Mendez tells his story. It's somewhat out there. He hypothesizes that it's not a virus or bacterial infection that's causing the chaos. Rather, infected words. When these words are processed by the brain, they infect the host. who then lose all sense and attempt to find an unaffected victim, eat them for some reason. Laurel Ann is deteriorating fast. She keeps slamming her head into the glass of the sound booth, and eventually it looks like she is chewed through her own lips. Eventually, her face erupts in streaming spew of blood and vomit. Kind of like The Exorcist meets the Joker, who falls dead to them. The herd outside busts into the station, trapping Grant, Sidney, and Dr. Mendez in the booth. Now that they know that certain words are the cause of the infection, they stay silent. How to escape. They decide to loop a message and broadcast it over the loudspeaker outside, which lures the herd away, but Dr. Mendez starts exhibiting symptoms of infection, and they leave him behind. Grant and Sidney head for the kitchen, where they're attacked by a child who tries to eat their faces, but no problem. Stop. So it's all good. Unfortunately, the recording fails and "Oh Canada" blares over the speakers in the station, luring the herd back inside. Dr. Mendez, not fully under the thrall of the infection, leaps out of the small window he came in through and leads them away from the station, giving Grant and Sidney a few minutes. After some scotch, Sidney starts repeating the word "kill" over and over. She's infected. Grant is wondering, how do you kill your understanding of a word? How to completely transform it until it is unrecognizable in your head. Desperately, he repeats over and over to Sidney, "Kill is kiss, kill is kiss, kill is kiss," and manages to uncouple the word from its meaning in Sidney's mind, curing her. Of course, now they have to kiss, or I guess kill each other, whatever, one with the tongue, before Grant declares that it's time to save the world, baby. He jumps on the air one last time, try to get the word or words out, but how to repeat what he did with Sidney. They don't know which words are infected, so he starts babbling over the air in an effort to uncouple other words in people's minds. There's no way to know if it's working. Outside, all they can hear are gunshots and explosions, presumably the military gunning down the infected. They announce to the station to stop their broadcast, or else. But Grant, he has no intention of stopping. The ominous voice counts down in French from 10. Then an explosion, cut to black, the end. There is, to the best of my ability, a decoding of what went on in Pontypool. Harry, what are your initial thoughts?
When I hear this summary and I pretend that's a pitch or a concept meeting, it's fascinating because it's radically different than what you would see. It's almost like, you've seen movies that have happened before where it's focused on the newsroom or in a newspaper and they're running news. It's a big hot topic item, a war breaking out, some political scandal, and it's all about the relationship and the politics that are happening in the newsroom. Here it's like you're seeing an apocalypse happen outside, and how is that translated into a small group of people who are just radio hosts? And how that plays out is, based on your synopsis, is extremely interesting and fascinating. Yeah, there's other things I'd like to talk about, but I don't want to blow my load right off the bat at the beginning, so we can save it for the detailed discussion.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you blow your load right at the beginning, then you rest up and you can circle back around to blast another one off at the end. So do what you got to do, man. Well, maybe hold it in for now.
No, I'll hold it in.
All right, let's do a little trivia. So just some facts. So this movie premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, September 2008, and then it sort of rolled out in limited releases after that in Toronto 2000. It did premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival on March 14th, 2009 in the United States, and then continued rolling limited release. Do you want to take a guess as to what the lifetime domestic gross was for this film?
10 pesos.
It was about 10 pesos, $3,865 was the domestic take in the United States.
300,000 or 3,000?
3,800. The total international gross was $32,118. I couldn't find the budget for this movie, but I hope they managed to make back their money. Obviously not a big budget production. So obviously not a very widely seen film. The film was directed by Bruce McDonald, Canadian director. He's done lots of TV, mostly Canadian stuff, including 17 episodes of Degrassi, The Next Generation. So that was kind of his bread and butter there for a couple of years. The writer, Tony Burgess. This screenplay is actually based on his own novel called Pontypool Changes Everything, which is the middle novel in the Pontypool trilogy.
There's a trilogy.
There's a trilogy of books. Yeah, well, the first is a collection of short stories, then this one, and then there's a third book, a novel afterwards. And they're not all the same storyline. They all kind of take place in small Ontario towns where.
All about the zombie apocalypse.
Not necessarily, no.
Oh.
No, different shit. Yeah.
Okay.
So why you'd say it's part of a trilogy, I don't know, but that's what the interwebs say. We have our cast. Georgina Riley as Laurel Ann Drummond, and she's still active. She does mostly Canadian stuff, television. She's still out there. We have Alianik as Dr. Mendez. He's originally from Sudan, but has actually a very long career as an actor. Mostly Canadian. He was in like a bunch of those like sort of cheap sci-fi series made in Canada, like when they did RoboCop, the TV show, Tech War, Kung Fu: The Legend Continues, stuff like that. So he's still around there. We have Lisa Houle as Sydney Breyer. She doesn't have a lot of credits to her name, about 12 acting credits. She was in the non-fat yogurt episode of Seinfeld.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Was it the kid's mom?
I think it was the kid's mom. I didn't actually go to confirm that's the character, but I'm pretty sure that's who she played, so I have to go back and check it out. And then most notably, Stephen McHattie as Grant Mazzy. It's a fake!
If you know what I'm referring to.
I don't remember that reference, no.
No, you don't? Are you serious?
I'm serious. I know what I know him from, but I don't know that quote.
It's that Deep Space Nine episode.
Oh, yeah.
He was the Romulan.
Yeah, he's the Romulan, in Deep Space Nine. Yeah, I did have him down as an episode of DS9, but I couldn't place the character.
Oh, it's that one where in the pale moonlight.
Oh, that's such a good episode.
Yeah. But it's that funny gif. It's a fake.
Yes, right. I mean, this dude's been everywhere. He was also in an episode of Star Trek Enterprise. Speaking of Zack Snyder, he was in Watchmen, episodes of The Outer Limits, X-Files, A Quantum Leap, and most notably, he's got that kind of voice, right? Most notably in 4 episodes of Seinfeld as Dr. Reston.
Oh, yes.
Who was Elaine's psychiatrist / boyfriend.
That's right.
Yeah, but he's still active. He has over 200 credits going all the way back to the 50s.
50s?
And 1952. He's been around for sure and is still going. So it's kind of neat. I mean, obviously he's not like a big marquee actor, but
he's a great character actor.
Great character actor. Yeah. And you can tell he was certainly the strongest performer of the bunch here. He was pretty good. I thought the others struggled a little bit. He's actually also married to the actress who played Sydney Breyer there. They're married and have kids. I don't know, maybe they met on an episode of Seinfeld way back in the 90s. Who knows? So
you never know, yeah.
You never know, yeah. So that's some trivia there. Any talking points you want to jump in on before we dive into the blow by blow?
No, just the main actor. Sorry, his name again is...
Stephen McHattie.
Stephen McHattie. Yeah, just mainly recognizing him right off the bat when I saw him. I wouldn't recognize him by the name, but just by the face or even the voice. It was like, oh yeah, I know who you are. He was also in A History of Violence. He's the guy who got killed or beaten to a pulp at the beginning by Vigo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's where I remember him. Yeah, so outside of that, don't know any of the other actors in this first time.
Yeah, no. Unless you were an avid Canadian TV watcher, then they'd be pretty mysterious for sure. So let's jump in here. So we'll take the opening of what's presumably a radio broadcast, and the voice is spouting some fucking nonsense. And I had to watch it a couple times to kind of decode it and then read the script. But basically we get what is a broadcast. This is one of Mazzy's broadcasts. It's not read in his voice. This is actually the voice of the author who wrote it.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
According to the credits.
I love this opening.
Yeah, I really like this opening too. It does definitely set the stage for the concept behind the film, which is pretty neat. Let's take a look here as the film opens. So what did you think of the opening here? Did you go back and watch it, or did you look up what was said?
No, I watched it twice by just coincidence because I had started watching the movie and then stopped it because I didn't know anything about the movie. So then I stopped it, and then I had to wait another evening for my wife to join me because I thought it was going to be another French movie that you had referred me to because it seemed like it was going down that way because he spouts a few French slangs in there or French phrases, and then watched it, and then it turned out to be something completely different than what I had thought based on the opening. So, I did watch it a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, there's some fun wordplay going on here, which is neat. The Norman Mailer bit I thought was fascinating, where he says, the quote is, Norman Mailer had an interesting theory that he used to explain the strange coincidences in the aftermath of the JFK assassination. In the wake of huge events, after them and before them, physical details, they spasm for a moment, they sort of unlock, and when they come back into focus and suddenly coincide in a weird way, street names, birth dates, middle names, all kinds of superfluous things appear related to each other. It's a ripple effect. So what does it mean? It means something's going to happen, something big. So I thought that was a neat way to open it up, where they talk about it. Yes. I mean, it's very overt foreshadowing, but doing it in the manner that they do with the several word plays I thought was interesting. And this is a hard thing to do. Word plays are tough in film. They're easier obviously in novels or the written word. It's easier to do that. In film, it often gets lost. And I think that this might be one of the issues with the film is that it has trouble nailing the linguistic component that's sort of at the heart of the concept here. And this opening piece here, again, I'd watched it a couple times and I was like, what is this guy talking about? So that was kind of my thoughts at the start, but certainly a fascinating way to open the film. But as we move past that, it's a dark and stormy morning and Grant Mazzy's on his way to work, having an argument with his manager over the phone. And I thought, actually my first thought, I was just like, man, I'm struggling with this dialogue, but it was all right. And then he pulls over, or he stopped at a light or a stop sign, and there's a lady outside who's just standing there mouthing something weird. Sort of this creepy echoes when he shouts out the window after, like his voice being repeated back to him. And I thought that was kind of a neat, ominous way to open proceedings here. Something's wrong and something's coming, but you don't know exactly what. So I thought that was good. Then we get to the...
Yeah, I agree. I love that kind of opening. It sets the mood and atmosphere. So for a genre movie like this, which is supposed to be somewhat of a horror movie, I appreciated that. Somewhat of a staple. It's not that they're doing anything new, but I did like the way that was done. But I agree with you. The dark and stormy morning, you just see that. What's that stupid Next Gen episode where they go to the hotel and then
the Royale?
The Royale, and then Picard opens the novel because he has to understand the book, and he goes, "It's a dark and stormy night," and then he does the Picard head rub.
Yeah, he's like, oh,
facepalm, the Picard facepalm.
Yeah, so. I really like that episode.
What?
You don't like that episode?
No.
It's so good.
No.
I mean, it's retarded, but it's so good.
Not good.
If it was within the scope of what we do on the show, we could do an entire episode or a series of episodes on season 2 of TNG. I think that would be great. Anyway.
That'll definitely kill me.
What's that?
That would definitely kill me.
Oh, yeah. Well, good. And then let's do it next week. So we get to the radio station, and there we got to get a feel for what's going on. It seems to me that he's a former hotshot, sort of shock jock who's been booted out of the big city, maybe said the wrong thing on the air, and now he's picking up somebody's jockstrap in small town Pontypool, Ontario, in the middle of the snow. Producers, we get introduced to Laurel Ann and Sydney. There's some awkward exposition here. The dialogue's not so great. We get some exposition where Laurel Ann used to be, or she's a veteran of war in Afghanistan, and I don't know, I had some problems with the dialogue from Sydney. She seemed to be struggling a little bit with what was written for her here. There's some rough patches in here in the film, and then I kind of made a note that they kind of have just one camera move, that they just take the camera and they circle it around in an arc.
Oh, I remember that, and it was like, yeah, they did that 2 or 3 times. And there was one sequence, I think it went on for like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh boy, it was like I had to almost take my eyes off the screen. I was getting nauseous.
Yeah, I know. I was getting dizzy, and I don't mind that move. And I know that you have your limits when you've basically got in Star Trek parlance, a bottle episode going here. Everybody's sort of sitting in the same room the whole time, but boy, that started to get old quick, and we're not even like 10 minutes in here.
No. And I agree. The beginning here, I appreciated it because it felt like they're introducing the characters and then showing like he wants to kind of do his own thing, but he's being controlled and micromanaged by the producer here. And it's his like first few days at the station here, right? That's the impression I get.
That's the impression I get too, yeah.
So it's a new job, a new posting for him. So I appreciated that conflict, but it just felt like it did take a very long time to establish all that, and it could have been tightened a little bit before the strange reports started to come out. Like, I was really starting to watch the clock. I was saying, okay, we saw that ominous person at the beginning. Is something interesting going to happen here?
Right.
I started to think about that, and it was like, yeah, I was hoping it would speed up a little bit.
I was hoping it would speed up a little as well. Like, there was a couple of effective bits. I found the music was very ominous. It was standard ominous sort of background music, but I found it to be effective. And I liked some of the radio stuff when he started taking calls. He spices up the morning by throwing just some straight fake news on the air. And when you call 911 topic, I thought worked. And then that idiot comes on. He's like, well, what if there was another number like 912?
Oh, yeah. I remember that was an amusing call. We've all thought about that. But I think that's also a played joke. So yeah. I was kind of surprised that really we're going down that road again. And then what was with those people coming in to sing? Those Middle Eastern people.
Yeah.
What the fuck was that about?
Yeah, I didn't get it either at the start. I was like, what? I had to rewind it. I'm like, well, I don't understand what's going on here. But they're like the local theater troupe, and they were doing a bit from Lawrence of Arabia.
Okay.
So that's what they were doing. I mean, they were obviously playing it up for being just ridiculous, like super racist and just stupid small town shit. It was just really ridiculous. And I mean, they were playing it for a joke and playing it for just it being really strange. It fell flat.
It completely fell flat, and I don't even know if they were trying to insert this for humor, like what was going on. But I realized they were using it for a placeholder. So what's the main character's name? The character in the movie, the radio host?
Grant Mazzy.
Grant Mazzy. So they were there for a placeholder so you could leave the booth and talk and do other things. So I get that.
Right.
It's purpose for the movie, but it again took too long, right?
Yeah, it took too long and it didn't seem to fit. Like it didn't have any other plugs into the main story. It really took me out of it because I'm like, what is going on here? This doesn't make any sense. I did enjoy, it was almost chilling to watch him. It's not a new thing, but it's certainly become a lot more prevalent today where he's just saying fake shit on the air to rise up his audience.
Oh yeah. But I mean, that's nothing new either.
That's nothing new. And it's very timely for what the world is like today. So yeah, there's still some back and forth between him and the producer. He's taking calls, but then the weird stuff starts to happen. There's a hostage situation, a potential hostage situation. There's then the story about the doctor's office that their eye in the sky, their traffic guy comes in over I love this guy.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He was good. He was maybe my favorite character in the film. We never even see his face.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting aspects of a movie like this is that through the medium of radio and audio, you meet other people. And I think there's a couple of other callers, if I'm not mistaken, and you don't hear them. That's one aspect I find fascinating about them that I didn't.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept to introduce characters that way. It's sort of like a dark post-apocalyptic version of an episode of Frasier where you get these interesting call-ins.
Or the Flames post-game show.
Yeah, the Flames post-game shows, yeah. I haven't listened to one of those in a while, but there's some characters on those. The craziest people in the world are people who just watched or listened to a sporting event on TV or the radio and then wants to call in and talk about it after he's had fucking 40 beers.
It's always entertaining.
It is always entertaining. There's no doubt about that. But I love the Sunshine Shopper. Ken's Dodge Dart. He drives around downtown taking the temperature of the traffic and stuff. It's good. But I find that a lot of this starts getting kind of tired. Like we said, I kind of want the story to get going here, and it doesn't feel quite ominous enough. The biggest thing that happens is what he describes that the offices of Dr. Mendez, it looks like a protest, unruly crowd, and then there's some question about Mendez's character for writing unnecessary prescriptions. And then it sounds like the whole place just blows up outside. So this kind of is where the spark hits. And I found that now it's starting to work for me as far as like the action.
Yeah, for sure. So, this is where my attention piqued interest a little bit more as well. I did enjoy the guy's description of how things are happening. I found it fairly genuine and amusing as well, especially as it's unveiled that he's not the guy. It's not Arnie Pie in the sky. It's Joe Blow in my truck. I did like how that unraveled as a joke. But yeah, his description of how things are happening, very interesting. And I wouldn't say terrifying, but that definitely grabs your interest. I do have one question though for you, just in terms of the general plot, because this is a zombie movie after all. So the hordes of people storm the office of the doctor, but the whole concept of how people are turning into zombies, as you might get into, I'm sure we'll talk about, is based on some trigger word or something in the language. So why are people storming the office? This I don't understand. Is there a reason why they're storming the office? Because if they're just mindless zombies at that point, why would they be targeting this office?
Yeah, so what's odd here, I went back and watched this scene a couple times and I did read the transcript of it, is the people were already in the building and the building explodes outwards.
Okay.
So the impression I got was this dude was a bit shady himself. Now, it's not that anything started here, but I got the impression that there was a ton of people in the building that he might have been examining or something like that. And then as they started to go nuts, it just blew apart.
So he wasn't the orchestrator of this whole thing. He was just a doctor at this hospital or something like that. They went to that place for people who were starting to lose their sense through the language, just like they're babbling and they're about to turn. So they all go there, then chaos erupts. explodes and he escapes. That's what's happening.
I think so.
Okay, because I was confused because I thought maybe he had something to do with orchestrating this event.
Yeah, I don't think so. We'll come to that point because we're going to meet Dr. Mendez in a bit.
Sure.
Things are kind of going crazy. Now, what also is interesting about this scene here, as the Sunshine helicopter here reports, is that there's helicopters and armored trucks like right now, right as this happens. So that tells you that these guys were already on their way down. So some shit had been going and they were coming already. They were already on the way to Pontypool with their Humvees and their helicopters and all that stuff. So that's why I was thinking something was already happening. So Mendez couldn't have been like the orchestrator of any of this stuff. But we'll come back to him in a second here. So they're trying to get Kent to get moving. Laurelyn and Sydney are trying to get more information on the news wire. They can't get through to anybody with the Ontario police. They just don't know what's going on. Yeah, so they got nothing on the story. This is where Lawrence and the Arabians...
Yeah, because they bring him in because... Well, I understand why, because if you're a live news radio station, you get a break in the story, you gotta feel out all your sources, so they throw these people on to buy them time.
Yeah.
So I get it. Whether it's interesting for us to watch is the other story, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. But one of the kids does start repeating the phrase over and over again. I can't remember how it ends. So there's another sort of little device that comes back later where there's other folks in the building. And then, so they go back on the radio, and this is where they start to get some more calls. Eyewitnesses and people are getting an idea of what's going on in the town, especially in and around the offices of Dr. Mendez. So this is also a tough movie to kind of like transcribe, right? There's no action. They go back on the radio, they kind of talk on the phone, or they're sitting there wondering what's going on. There's the blizzard outside. Like, it's a really compelling setting to me. To describe it, you can kind of feel the claustrophobia of the whole situation with the blizzard, and there's this strange shit going on out there, and they don't know what's going on. They're trying to get eyewitness accounts, callers. They got a guy out there. He keeps cutting in and out, and then you kind of get into it, and I'm not sure, like, the action itself just doesn't quite seem to land, because all of the sequences sort of blend together. And even as like going back through the scene by scene, I'm like, all right, I don't know. What point was this and what happens here, right? So,
well, you know what? I agree with you. What I tried to do is I tried to remember moments where I was watching some tragedy or some news event live and I sat there and I was waiting for more information. The biggest, or the most obvious one is 9/11, right? Mm-hmm. Completely different situation. I mean, one that's real, it's tragic. Here it's just a movie. But information was coming in slow, at least at first. And then after that, you're waiting to find out what happened and what's going on, even though the tragedy, all the terrorists struck and stuff like that. So I was trying to put myself in those shoes while I was watching this movie saying, how are these news anchors here, or radio hosts, and me as a viewer, if I was listening into this radio station, how would I be responding? So I found that to be the more interesting aspect of the movie, and I was trying to give it a bit more leeway in trying to find its footing, because I felt that's kind of the purpose, the interesting aspect or indie aspect of this movie, the way it's filmed. Mm-hmm. That's how I looked at it.
No, and I think in large part that is what they're going for. Mm-hmm. I definitely think so. I mean, they're not trying to take the action outside of the radio station and show us anything huge or fantastical. It's simply what's happening, what are they hearing, and what are they able to transmit to the public. And it is a very compelling scenario. I love the thought. I mean, that's a good point. Like, when we consume our news a lot differently today, like, I don't remember the last time I sat and watched the news. Something was going on, like I'm on the internet.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different way of consuming things, listening to the news on the radio. I mean, Jesus, I don't remember the last time I did that. Even in 2008, when this movie came out 10 years ago, it was still the internet, wasn't it?
Everything
Looking
internet,
for news?
yeah. I mean, it's either live TV or internet, for sure. And now it's just all social media. No one's gonna be doing anything else. It's all social media now.
People are checking their Twitter feed for it. Now, when the movie came out, that wouldn't have been the case. But anyway, so we get back to the action here. So somebody from the BBC calls in trying to get Mazzy or somebody from the town on the line, is that they've heard these reports. So Grant is on with the BBC. And I like this scene here because he kind of goes from the big fish in the small pond to just the opposite, right? Very little fish in a big pond, like the BBC being a big deal. And his whole demeanor changes. His confidence is gone. I thought this was a good character moment where he's like, oh, well, Nigel, no, that's true. And he's talking very uncertain terms. I thought this was a good character moment. again, the fake news getting out that separatists and terror groups and things like that in rural Canada.
And I like that aspect. It's like, what else could be happening in Canada? Oh, another referendum.
Well, yeah, rural Ontario. It's like, oh, separatists. It's like, no, yeah, I don't know. They're probably too drunk. No, that was a long time ago. But what else could be going on in Canada? Like, did the Canucks lose the Stanley Cup again? Another riot? That would be the only other explanation. Yeah. Like if the Toronto Maple Leafs went to the Stanley Cup final and lost, we'd have to get new maps done because Ontario would not be on that map anymore. Anyway, after BBC goes off, we get back to Ken, the eye in the sky, and he's definitely in a bad spot. This is where he's managed to make his way to a grain silo near the train tracks. And there's some crazy shit going on outside. He wants the police. There's no contact. And he starts to describe some pretty disturbing stuff. So he describes people like cannibals. Their eyes are all messed up. He describes a scene where a mob of people are pulling people out of a van. The way he describes it was really strange. He's like, they're pulling them out to the ground in their mouths. So it's like they're grabbing hold with their teeth and pulling these people down to the ground, which I thought was a really chilling image to describe. Yeah, I really liked it. Thought it was cool. So this is obviously where we get the idea that people, and they're pulling everybody apart. So obviously there's some zombie shit going on outside.
Yeah, this is your first confirmation this is now a zombie movie.
That's right. I think this is an excellent way to introduce that this is a zombie movie. I mean, we're well into the film by now, so maybe it's taking a little long to get here, but usually you see the zombie or you see a crashed car. I mean, I kind of liked how Zack Snyder did it in his Dawn of the Dead, where there's some crazy shit going on, but you see the zombie and it's a big revelation, whereas this is somebody else calling in. So we don't actually see anything at this point. It's just what we're hearing. There isn't any ever question that what we're seeing isn't what's happening. The callers aren't unreliable. Ken's not an unreliable guy. We can believe that he's telling us what he's seeing. It's interesting that we all have to kind of like visualize it along with, the protagonists, the guys that were in there. That's pretty effective. You see the look on Grant's face and he's in total disbelief there. This is one of those scenes I think works really well.
This is where the film, I guess, challenges the viewer at this point. Is the word of mouth is the medium through radio or your auditory sensibility? Is that going to impact the viewer the same way as someone seeing it on TV or on the news or watching it on the movie, like on a movie screen, right? Or on a television screen. So this is where the unique aspect of this movie, and this is where it challenges the viewer in that way, and that's what I like about it, and I find it refreshing. But, I'm sure we'll get into it, is it entertaining as a zombie movie? But I don't really think that's what the director or the writers were aiming for anyways.
Right. No, they're definitely not going for the standard zombiness, for sure. So Ken eventually cuts out here, and this is where the freaky French signal kind of cuts in, where their airwaves are taking over. We get this French broadcast.
I love this, yeah.
I really like this too, yeah. So they have to work, so it's bizarre that it's in French, and they got to work on the translation. So they get to it.
Again, this is the message that'll play when the Leafs do win the cup.
That's right. Avoid, for your safety, avoid contact with close family members. All terms of endearment. Yeah, I really like this message here. It's a little bizarre. So all terms of endearment, such as honey or sweetheart. And you remember honey was the name of the lost cat. Was kind of cool. A sweetheart, and avoid talking to young children. And I like this one, rhetorical discourse. Like, what does that even fucking mean? No. It's like talking about words. Yeah. What words mean, right? Which is the...
Well, why wouldn't they just say, and I thought about this when I watched the movie, why wouldn't they just say, don't talk? If you don't talk... At this point, write your messages down. Why wouldn't that be an option?
Well, I think the reason why is because they had some idea of what was going to go, right? Or what the problems were. And if you say, well, don't talk, then people are going to be like, well, why? But if there's like, here's the things you can't say, I don't know. I guess the reason is because this is a little bit more interesting, I suppose. Now, what I find interesting is why did the writer choose these items of language to be the things that spread or potentially spread the infection?
So I guess let's go back. So the trigger words were honey and sweetheart only, or there were other words?
all terms of endearment.
All
so
terms
like
of
honey,
endearment.
sweetheart,
So
baby,
most people
like
are,
all of that
yeah.
stuff.
So most people are in relationships. That's the easiest, very common words that'll be spoken on a daily basis in a household.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that would be your easy triggers.
Yeah.
Not suspicious, common everyday things. It's just like the 89 Joker, Jack Nicholson, using common household products. Fuck yeah.
To fuck you up.
Love that Joker.
Love that Joker. So let's talk about this for a second here, because this is obviously at the heart of the film, heart of the story here. So why do you think that these were the choices that because they could have made it any words. Rhetorical discourse, terms of endearment, talking with young children, probably because like baby talk, and for greater safety, please avoid the English language. Like, why these things?
So, again, I don't think that this movie's trying to, again, poke at, because it's Canadian film, the loss of the French language. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any commentary there. I mean, there could be, but I don't believe that's the case. The only thing I could think of is just those were just the common names spewed every day for anyone in a relationship with anyone. That's how it'll spread like wildfire.
Right, but lots of things could spread like wildfire, right? Like it could be, don't say the word the.
Yeah, that was the first thing. Like I was going to name my kid the. I think I told you this before. Because then the kid could be anything. Flash, the best.
The worst.
The worst. Hey man, you could change it every day. That's the beauty of it. But I got vetoed.
Now, that might have started a zombie apocalypse right there, which is... If anything, Harry, that was going to change us all into mindless, slobbering beasts, concept of naming a child might have been the thing to do it. Your wife might have saved the world there. You can tell her that.
Yeah, I'll mention it to her right after this.
I loved at the end there, and for greater safety, please avoid the English language and do not translate this message. I'm like, why didn't they start with that one? Like, you open with that, don't you? Don't translate this message.
I would think so. Well, I think that's just an oopsie. A stupid oopsie, but I think that's an oopsie. Because it felt like an oopsie.
It was kind of like when he said it, because as they're saying it, they're like, don't translate this message. Dun, dun, dun. We just translated it. Uh-oh.
So what do you think? What's your interpretation? Why did they pick those words?
Okay, I'm going to go backwards here, because there's the rhetorical discourse, first of all. So it's like talking about words, like talking about the meanings of words. So the first thing I think is because it's a writer who wrote it. Writers sometimes like to feel like really smart about words and shit, because nobody else cares about words but writers. So he's like, yeah, words are great, so I'm going to do this thing with words. And I think that was kind of where it came from. Now, it is still an interesting idea, because if you've ever tried to have a conversation with somebody about the meaning of words, if that person is halfway intelligent, that could be really interesting, but it still doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like when Bill Clinton in his hearings back in the day was like, well, it depends what your definition of the word is. It's like, what did you just say to me? I don't understand. It's fascinating, but meaningless at the same time. So I think that's kind of what he's got, is that there's meaning and total lack of meaning kind of coupled up together. And it's interesting. It doesn't play very well on the screen, but it's neat if you think that words are cool.
That's the interesting aspect of this movie.
Yeah.
I think this is where the movie hangs its hat on thematically, and I think that's the interesting aspect of discussion.
Yeah, certainly. And when it comes to the terms of endearment, I think he used that as an easy way of having words for something that's not a something. Like honey is honey, like if you like to, from bees, and it's also a term of endearment, like you call somebody not by their name, but by a pet name, if you will, or a term of endearment, like honey. Like, so you have sort of a word that doesn't mean what you're using it for. So the language is twisted. Same with sweetheart and like baby and all that stuff. It's like, what is the meaning of these words? What we use them for isn't what the words mean, and yet we make the words mean these other things that they aren't. So it kind of branches off in all these weird directions. And I think that the reason he did that is because you can kind of see it sort of splinter out. It becomes confusing when you try to wrap your head around it. And then the idea of the film is that it's almost like once these splinters take hold in their minds, they just lose it. That's what creates that infection. That's what I think is happening here with these specific concepts. There's like things that mean stuff but don't mean anything and also mean something else. And then it just splinters in your mind, and then you go crazy and have to eat somebody.
Darmok, when the walls fell.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
In fact, now that I think about it, I think the only person who could survive this apocalypse in this way would still be Captain Kirk. Sabotage. So he probably would avoid it.
I say sabotage.
Yes. So I think he would still trump the rest of the human race anyways.
Well, if he needed to talk a fucking computer to death, yeah, he's on it, man. He's on it.
Fuck these trigger words. Watch what I can do.
Shaka when the walls fell. As we move past the translation there, we get Ken back. And there's a zombie in his hiding spot trying to get at him, but this thing's acting really strange. He doesn't have any hands for some reason. And
I love this scene.
yeah, this is really creepy. Like his body's all broken up. According to Ken, his body's broken to pieces. Wrists are stumps. And the sound coming out of his mouth is just like a baby crying for its mother. And I was like, oh, God. Ugh. It's just a creepy. What did you think?
Yeah, I loved it. This was the one aspect when we're talking about horror that I appreciated, right? Because there's not much of that here. I'm sure you'll get to the scene where the one girl turns, but these descriptions here are very effective, and I appreciated it. Again, going back to me trying to place myself, if I'm listening to a news broadcast and something tragic is happening and trying to place yourself in those positions or in those shoes, well, how would I react? But the way this is described, it lets your imagination run wild. And that's kind of the way of being effective. If there's one aspect of Hitchcock that's here, it's in this scene. Right? So,
yeah. There's a good line here that's creepy. And Ken is saying it sounds like there's a child screaming inside his breath. I thought it was a really good line. Maybe a little overwritten, but still.
Very effective.
Very effective, yeah. It's creepy as shit.
I can't recall. Did we hear something? I thought we heard something.
I don't think we did. No, we must have because Grant heard it. Yeah, we did hear it.
Yeah, I have a memory that we heard it, which was creepy too.
Yeah, we did hear it. And that was Ken. That was creepy. So he's freaking out at this point. He's thinking this is a joke or somebody's pulling a stunt or something like that. He's on the radio and he's having trouble like figuring it out. They ask to go to a pre-tape thing so he can take a break. So he freaks the fuck out. He's like, I'm out of here. Tries to run out of the blizzard. And he gets out there. Again, had a little bit of trouble with Sydney's performance here. He gets out and she's like, don't leave me. I need you. And I'm like, well, okay. It seems like a bit of a leap here. And Laurel Ann's there. She turns into soldier mode. She says, we have an enemy, sir. And this is all played a little bit weird for me. But what was cool is like as they kind of heard whatever was out there repeating back like their screams or her screams, like, don't walk out on me, Grant, I need you. And it keeps echoing back. So that was kind of creepy. We still don't see anything.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Now, they get back and they do the obituaries.
See, just before you move, I think this is where, again, because the movie's not focusing on that horror aspect, but I think it would be effective if a better director or someone who's more fine-tuned into achieving that, because it's a blizzard, you can't see anything, but I think they could have built that suspense a little bit more, where you're hearing those echoes coming back, surrounding you, you're fucked. And you build that terror, you build that suspense, and this is where I wish the movie built on that a little bit more, especially then you'll start getting the scenes that you'll get into, but I think they could have built into that, because right now you're a little bit kind of weirded out, creeped out a little bit, but you're not scared, there's no tension, and I think that's the drawback of this movie.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of the whole movie so far, right, is like, this idea is good, like the fact that they kind of do this where they're going outside and they hear the echoes coming back, that's all really creepy. The idea that's really creepy. The execution's not quite on the money. And for me, I was caught up in kind of the shakiness of the performances in this scene. So I couldn't really get into, oh man, that's really creepy. These echoes coming back, right? It's really neat. But I was focused on something else. The scene wasn't shot to sort of heighten that tension, to heighten the claustrophobia. It was standard shots of the actors' faces and the lines were a little shaky. So it's a missed opportunity on something that probably would have been really neat. Like I want to see a remake of this movie with a reasonable budget and a bit of just a solid rewrite of the script.
No, just this concept. I think that's just fascinating. But you don't see anything. It's almost like it's like a reverse Quiet Place. Have you seen A Quiet Place yet?
Not yet.
I don't want to spoil it for you, so it's almost like the reverse of that. So, A Quiet Place really effectively done. High budget, very well directed and acted, and a lot of tension, but with the focus on it being a horror movie. And it builds that tension very effectively. Here, I don't think it's focusing on the horror. The horror's the zombies just a backdrop to tell a story about this medium.
Right. They don't lean into the horror elements as much as they probably could, because, I mean, this movie needs some of that tension. It needs that background tension, that atmosphere, that ambiance in order to make it interesting because we're in one room basically for the whole thing, right? It's got to be all in that atmosphere. It's not quite, it's there in certain scenes, right? They make it happen here and there, but this one kind of breaks. I think that breaking to, I don't know, I guess they kind of had to do it. It almost feels to me like it breaks. The tension's all in the sound booth. Like they're on the radio with the phones. That's where I feel like we're stuck. And when they get up from there, I'm like, oh, it felt like it broke the tension for me a little bit.
That's right. But I mean, for some reason it just hit me. Have you ever seen the movie Cloverfield?
Yeah, I've seen Cloverfield. Yeah.
So, you know how the beginning of the movie, it takes a while to get started, but then you hear the news reports and you hear the screams and the explosions, and then it becomes more first person, documentary type. But before it gets to that point, for those maybe those 5 minutes when you first hear the problem, like the shaking start, and that's when the tension is building. And that's where I think this movie could have used a bit of more of that. And I think we're on the same page, but I think that's where you build that horror aspect.
Yeah, I agree. Especially in a film like this, that's where we got to build that. Definitely. Instead of Lawrence of Arabia, maybe we could have had a couple minutes of building that stuff up. So, fuck, that was a weird scene, man.
Yeah.
So, okay. Do you remember the obituaries scene?
No. You fresh my memory.
Okay. So it's right after they come back downstairs and they go to the obituaries. And what actually plays on screen is just a black and white montage of some rural people.
Okay.
And there's the farmland. And so he just reads off names. Gwendolyn Parker was taken from this life in her 45th year by her beloved husband Stanley, who left this world suddenly. So it was like every obituary was like a murder, suicide, murder, 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 suicide, murder, suicide, murder, murder, suicide, which was really, really strange.
Yeah, it was weird because now that I remember it, I thought that these, and it's stupid me, I thought these obituary readings were coming in as live updates, which can't be the case. So, but it felt like that's what was happening. But now that I'm thinking about the movie again, this was just him reading this shit, trying to make sense of parsing the information of what he just saw outside. Almost like saying, we're fucked, we're surrounded, we're stuck in this underground bunker / radio station in this building. What are we going to do? That's just the memory I have now. It's been 2 weeks since I've seen the movie, 2-3 weeks. So yeah, I'm just trying to remember.
I had to go back because I was watching it. I mean, I didn't think it was like a live breaking news, but I didn't know what to make of it. And then I was just like, oh, wait a second, what the fuck is going on? I watched it again, and then I read it, and then I watched it again. And I can't find any deeper meaning of it except that it's all connected.
Well, how is it?
Okay, so we have the first lady who was killed by her husband, who then was murdered by family members, who then died at each other's hands.
So these are deaths that occurred in the last few days as a result of this zombie outbreak.
Well, it's hard to say because like what it's saying is like, okay, so this person died, this person was the one who killed her, and then he was killed by these other people who were then killed by this person, and then this person killed that person, and he survived long enough to add 4 names to the list before losing his life as a result of an accident.
So it makes sense. That's all.
On and on. Well, sometimes it's like, so-and-so had caused the untimely passings of this person, this person, this person, this person, and they were survived. Yeah, it's like everyone was killed by somebody else. It was just bananas. So yeah, I guess it was a result of this, but didn't look like anybody was eaten. It was like they were strangled, or there was a car accident.
Again, maybe the Leafs just won the cup.
Okay, here's what would happen. So this takes place in Ontario. So if the Leafs had won the Stanley Cup, this would be happening outside of Ontario. And if they lost, this is what would be happening inside Ontario.
So take your pick.
Yeah, take your pick. Exactly. So it's in Ontario, so they lost, which means the world is okay. That'll be a crazy day when that happens again. So anyway, after the obituary, and I just didn't know the purpose of the obituary scene. Like, it was just weird.
I think it's more just confirmation that these characters are realizing this shit's happening. Well, they don't know what's really going on outside. He's really confused, but now he's trying to put 2 and 2 together. Putting the information together. Well, I look at it. In Grant Massey's point of view.
That could be. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that explanation, that he's starting to put it together. That makes sense. So we get back into the station here, and this is where fucking Dr. Mendez crawls in through a window. I mean, I know it's a small town and all, but I know sometimes you got to move the story along and conveniences happen, but this was a little goofy to me that Dr. Mendez jumps in. Why did he go to the radio station? It didn't sound like he went there because it's like, I got to pass the truth. It's just like where he ended up.
Unless he knew this was the one radio station in town. It's a small town. I don't know.
Yeah, but why did he go to the radio station?
To get the truth out? I have no idea.
But he didn't seem to want to get the truth out. He didn't know what the truth was.
I agree.
crawled into
I
it.
agree. It's weird. Instead of
Yeah.
running for his life, he stops here.
I mean, I can see like, oh shit, I gotta take shelter. One thing is a blizzard. Two, there's crazy zombies. I gotta crawl in through a window. It was almost like this is the one he happened to pick.
Well, at least his name isn't DJ.
TJ. Or BJ, for that matter. I don't know. What are we even talking about here? And this is where Laurel Ann starts to get a little hinky. I like this, actually. I like how the insider, and you can tell because she starts repeating the word, and it's confusing her, or the phrase, like missing Mazzy, missing Mazzy, missing Mazzy. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you before, but this has happened to me plenty of times where for some reason, like a word stops sounding in your head like the word, and like it doesn't mean what it means. And I think that's what they were going for with this concept, is like all of a sudden that word is fucked up in your brain. Has that ever happened to you?
I wouldn't say that. I'd say I have a lot of other problems in my brain. But...
Well, yeah. That's fair.
But no, I'll
You mispronounce words all the time.
Mispronounce words, or I'll just say the wrong word in the wrong place, even though I know the word I should say in my brain, it'll come out wrong here and there. That happens. So I probably need to...
Harry's a zombie, and you need to find him, and you need to shoot him in the face. He's lost all meaning. Yeah. Well, but we've all had sort of disassociations with words, with language. Whether it's you wanted to say one thing, it came out another way, you mispronounced something that you know how to pronounce, but it just came out wrong. Or the word, like as I said in my experience, like the word just sounds weird in my head, even though it's the same word. And again, like this is an interesting idea. I think that is kind of what they're going for here in scenes like this, but it's one of those that's hard to do in film. Like visually it's tough, but it's good. Like we're like, oh, like she's starting to go. And she hasn't had any contact with any zombies. Like, why is she starting to get fucked up? So they retreat to the sound booth here. And this is kind of like where we get, I guess, a bit of an explanation as to what's going on. And they're still trying to keep up the show. We've got Mendez on the show here. And Laurel Ann she's freaking out on the outside here. So this is the one true jump scare, I guess, in the movie that I recall. Yeah, sort of. Where she starts like banging her head against the glass. I jumped a little bit when like her face like exploded in a stream of vomit. That was like, ooh. That got me a little bit. It got me a little.
It was a good scene.
It was a good scene.
But I think the first smash against the window was the jump scare for me.
Yeah, it was unexpected. I mean, we hadn't seen any gore or anything like that to this point. So she kind of deteriorates. And also when she had like, it looked like she had chewed through her mouth. So it was just her teeth showing. Was kind of, yeah.
Did they go that far? I couldn't recall.
They did. Yeah, they did. But Mendez is trying to explain everything at this point, right? So it's starting to sort of coalesce a little bit. Now that I read it, it looks like it's starting to explain the murder-suicides a bit. So he's like, the victim suicides, as he says. So he says, the victim suicides, but the victim needs a victim to suicide into. So it's like everybody needs to kill themselves, but they got to take somebody with them at the same time in order to try to excise this infection. And he's not really sure why.
And that's an awesome concept. So that's a bit of a twist on zombie lore where zombies will just go eat or bite other people. But here it's kind of more unique and I love this aspect, how you just described it. And it's something that I didn't pick up when I watched the movie, but it makes sense based on the obituaries and what she's doing there. Is she wants to kill other people, or the victims need to kill other people before they can die themselves. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's not something you normally see, right? Like you say, it's a very different concept, and sorry, we're just getting a visit from Vesper the cat here. It is a different take, for sure. It's a neat idea. So we get back to Ken, and unfortunately for Ken, it looks like things are getting worse. I mean, the immediate danger of this attacker is past, but we can't understand what's going on outside. He's kind of freaking out, and Ken sort of checks out, basically. He keeps repeating the same word over and over and over again. And he's gone. We'll say goodbye. Torman and the Sunshine Shop for Ken.
So I have a question for you.
All right.
So we had the girl's name, or the woman's name, Laurel Ann. And now...
A-N-N.
Okay, Laurel Ann. And then now Ken. Did they kind of give it a hint to what their trigger words were?
Okay, so Ken was simple. Simple, because that was what he repeated. He's like, simple question, simple.
Okay.
And then he's gone. And then hers was Massey and missing. Like hers was Grant. Like his last name, Massey, was her trigger.
So this is where I take issue with the movie, is why is that her trigger word? Because now you can get into theory. I don't think that's the purpose of the movie, is who orchestrated this bullshit to happen in the first place. Mm-hmm. And what are the trigger words? So it would just be something that's common in the language. And now you're talking about something more specific. Simple is still somewhat common, but now it almost seems like it's custom to different people.
Yeah.
And that is where I don't understand.
Yeah, I got the impression that it was custom, that it could have been anything. This is my interpretation of it, is that it could have been anything for any person. But any time that something happened where a word got stuck or the meaning started to like disassociate from the sound of the word, then you were in big trouble. So that could be anything to anybody. And I think with the broadcast earlier, most commonly it was these things. Because it was easier to disassociate the word from the meaning. Like that's when it happens for most people, but it could happen to any word for any person. It just took like just a little bit, like a bite where, oh, that was the word that got stuck in your head and you couldn't get it out and now you're screwed.
I hear what you're saying. It makes sense based on how it's portrayed from a logistics standpoint, whoever orchestrated this.
Well, if anybody did indeed orchestrate it, or if it was just something that happened naturally.
Naturally,
right?
Yeah, maybe. Well, I guess if someone wanted to orchestrate it, they should use the word fuck or shit. Get everybody in a day.
Yeah, it would exactly be over. Like, unless you're a Mormon, you're dead.
Yeah, Thanos, you don't need to snap your finger. Just orchestrate this and the trigger word's fuck or shit. You're done.
That's right. Anybody who have Tourette's, you're done. Dead.
Yeah, the only person left would be Steve Rogers. That'd be it.
Steve Rogers. And all the Mormons. Nothing against Mormons. Yeah.
Now that would be an Avenger
team. Curse.
That's an Avenger team right there. Steve Rogers.
Steve Rogers is the Mormon Avengers.
Thanos is fucked.
Well, they don't drink or smoke or do drugs or drink coffee, so they're focused as shit.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're coming for you. Gosh darn it. So after we sign off, I like this little scene here. So after they lose Ken, Grant is like, oh, I'm really sorry. He was a friend of yours, wasn't he? She's just like, nah, Ken was a pedophile.
That was a great line.
That was so good. And then she's like, oh, he wasn't really a pedophile. We never let our kids go anywhere near him. I don't know why they threw that in there, but it was a pretty good laugh. I mean, it's dark, but it was funny. It was funny. Like,
I guess they needed something.
You know what? They did need something there. You always need something to lighten the load, but it was an odd way to do it. But anyway, so we get the conversation with the doctor, and he doesn't really know what's going on, but he's trying to like piece it together. It's not in the blood, it's not in the air, and it's just in the words. And it's like, it's not all words, not all speaking, but some words are infected, spreads out. He doesn't really know, but he's trying to figure it out here. I felt like there was such a missed opportunity here because it's such an interesting idea. This is where they try to crystallize it for us. This is the exposition scene for what's going on. And it doesn't hit for me. It doesn't land. It was neat. It just didn't. I was like, I wanted more. It reminded me, remember when we did Wes Craven's New Nightmare? And it's like created this demon by writing about this demon and it tried to come into the real world.
Right.
This felt sort of the same way. It's like this infection, whatever this thing was, sort of sprang out. The line in the movie is that it could have sprung spontaneously out of a perception and found its way into language. And it could leap into reality itself. I was like, yeah, that's really neat.
Well, but then you explore that concept.
Right, exactly.
Right? Yeah. Here it's just someone just saying it, and it's like, well, yeah, shit happens.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, that's the explanation. All right, it's fine. It just doesn't hit. And then that was kind of shit. But then they're talking about it. They decide to go silent. Sydney calls her kids. She's using all the terms of endearment here. Yeah. She's saying honey and sweetie and all this stuff. I'm like, oh man, Jesus Christ, Lig, did you not listen to the transmission before? Don't do any of that. But here she is doing it, talking to her kids. And then the doctor, you can see him starting to go.
So again, the trigger word, but as we talked about, it could be anything. Him just getting lost in thought. So I feel like still there's a bit of that inconsistency where we're talking about it's a trigger word versus it's just something that starts in your brain and just keeps going. Because you just said the mother uses the words honey and sweetie, and that's probably what starts to get her.
Well, maybe, but her word isn't that though, right? Her word
is
kiss later. Yeah. And it's only all in English for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not going to poke fun at English language here. I know they talk about French and English here very briefly, but it's not a focus.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. It's not. I had some thoughts there, but you're right. It's not really a focus. But they do say it's only the English that's effective.
Well, maybe the guy who orchestrated this if it is an orchestration, he can't speak it.
It's Emmanuel Macron is who it is. Who orchestrated it.
It's Dr. Claw.
There it is, Dr. Claw. What is interesting, here is something that is interesting though, and unfortunately it's not here, and they should have put it in here because it would have been great, is like, in order to get a word into the English language, You just have to say it a lot. And then the next edition of Webster's Dictionary is going to have all these words in it that just sprang up out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like meme or podcast or selfie or shit like that. Like those are words in a dictionary now that you go to a dictionary and look up the definition for. And English has always been that way. It's just like, okay, this is a word now because people say it and there's a definition for it. And English takes words from other languages too, like French and German and Russian or Spanish. Like it just takes words. And if it's like, we don't have a meaning for it, we just take the word. Like pajama, it's like a Persian word. Yeah, we didn't make our own word for it. We just took that one and used it. You know what I mean? Or like restaurant. It's like, the French got the word for it. We'll just take that word. And then it becomes part of the English language. French, on the other hand, in the French dictionary, like it's got to go through like this committee and they got to vote on it. And usually they don't let words into French. Like they're really protectionist about it.
They still don't have a committee where we decide what gets into Webster's Dictionary? I thought there's still a committee.
Yeah, they just no, but if it's like actually a word that people use, it goes in. The people who write the dictionary decide, but everything gets in.
It's not like Wikipedia, man. Come on.
There are publishers, but they don't exclude words. If it's like, okay, this is a word that people use and it has a meaning, it gets in. Like that's how English has always been.
So did Homer make Webster's like they predicted in The Simpsons?
I believe Homer isn't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Homer's in the dictionary.
Are you serious?
I think so.
No way.
Well, I don't know, man. You can go look it up. But what I mean is like that is the nature and structure of the English language is that it is an amalgam of all the languages. That's just how it's always worked. Centuries. That's how it's always been. That's partly why it's so easy and so difficult to learn is because like but they're all kind of floating. Yeah, French isn't like that.
Doesn't matter to me. I'm teaching my kids Klingon.
You might need to know that yourself first before you teach it. I'm not an expert in Klingon, but that'd be hilarious. They're just running around. They're like rolling their eyes. Fuckers don't know how to say a plot when they walk in their room. One of their rooms is like, hello. Like, stab them with a bat left.
They'll only do that when you visit.
Like, how dare you dishonor me? Or whatever that is in Klingon.
The greatest
language. They're only like 5, right? So
yeah.
That padlet's probably pretty heavy right now, but I'll be washing my back pretty soon. So
they're pretty violent. So
yeah, well, I can understand that. Like how many late night Halo sessions that they had to like have burned into their retinas. Like Harry's teabagging some 13-year-old in Halo there. Fucking blew his balls off. Like.
Yeah, I've shown them too much Witcher 3.
Yeah. That's a good game to show your small children, for sure. It's like I'm going to chop this witch's 4th tit off. Watch.
Yeah, there's been some close calls there. It's like, close your eyes!
I love these little interludes that we like to work into the show every now and then. Witcher 3. It's a good game, though. Anyway, where were we? We were talking about French and English. No, but I think that is a real thing, though. Like, take my word for it. French doesn't adopt new words, where English adopts new words. And you could see, if you were to extrapolate that out, in the context of this movie, you could expect English because it just brings everything in, right? Like, English doesn't wear a condom, is what I'm saying.
I'm sure tabernacle was not part of the original French dictionary. Yet here we are.
It sounds like a French word, though, doesn't it?
No, but it is. But I don't know if it's in the dictionary, but it might be. But I doubt that they were screaming it to the heavens in 1800.
But I don't know what that word means.
A bigger fuck, don't you remember?
Oh, yeah, that was from Bon Cop, Bad Cop, wasn't it?
That's right.
Okay. It might not be. Anyways, okay, so the doctor starts freaking out. Grant and Sydney are trying to speak some French so that they don't get infected. They leave the doctor in the sound booth there, and they go off. They put on the recording on the intercom outside to try to lure away the horde, which is now broken in. So we get a little bit of zombie stuff going on here, but they managed to lure them outside.
But before you continue, this was the disappointing parts. They get in. All of a sudden, they're just walking in. I mean, I'm not asking for the standard zombie invasion of a building where the hands are breaking plywood and yada, 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 and so on. But all of a sudden, they were just there, and it was just like, okay, I'll just lock ourselves in the booth. And yeah, it's a clever way of using the intercom to make a noise or whatever they did to get him back out. But it left me really wanting something.
Yeah, it wasn't great. That's definitely true. I will agree with you there. Now, they go to the kitchen. Actually, I like this scene when they go to the kitchen and the kid from the Lawrence of Arabia singers earlier is sitting there, like kind of off to the side. You don't really like, she's right there, but you're not really looking at it, but it's right there. And then you notice like, oh shit. And then it comes out and attacks them and they just murder, death, kill that poor creature. They just fuck him up. Yeah, I don't know. stomp it to death. That was a little bit gruesome without being gory. Like,
No, that worked for me.
And they just kept kicking and kicking and kicking. It worked. It's a good scene. I was just like, ugh. And then they argue over who killed it at the end, which is, it's a little dark humor there, which is fine. And then they're like, oh, you gotta kill the doctor. No, you kill the doctor. It's like, you already killed the kid. You go kill the doctor. It's like, no, you killed the kid. Okay, well then it's your turn to go kill the doctor. It was funny and very dark, but I thought it was good. We need a little zombie action, right?
Yeah, I guess so. If you call that action.
Well, they moved and they kicked somebody to death. I mean, considering they've been sitting in a fucking radio booth taking phone calls all day. Yeah, it qualifies as action. But the zombies break back in. They barricade themselves up. So the speaker breaks, starts playing the national anthem, and they gotta barricade themselves in a room behind the kitchen there. And so something she says here, so it's like understanding a word copies the virus. So how do you not understand a word? So again, it doesn't really come across. That's how I couldn't follow the path of infection. It didn't seem like that was how it went, how they're trying to explain it here. But this is where she starts going.
If you have notes or you recall, What was the path of infection that she was explaining? Her educated guess.
Let's see here. So they're trying to do the French. They stop. Again, it seems like it comes up from inside her. So it wasn't something said to her. It hits her. So, cause he's trying to reason it out. He's like, you kill the word killing you. And then he's like, yeah, you repeat it. And then he's like, I used to repeat words over and over again until they were incomprehensible, which is what I've done in the past. I understand that can happen. And he thinks it's an immune system response. You have to kill the word that's killing you, but it doesn't work. They still get sick. And then she starts going with kill, kill, kill. And that's obviously her trigger. She's saying kill. So she keeps repeating it over and over again, and he's trying to transform it in her mind, so he changes kiss. And I don't care. So that felt a little bit contrived to me.
It did, but it's like the power of suggestion with language. It's all within your mind. I don't know if that's where they're going with the story.
See, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. I don't know if that's where they're going with the story or not.
Because it's hard to say.
That's fascinating, though.
Because it's like the power of suggestion what triggered this event. So a different power of suggestion can undo the event. It's the antidote, or it's the solution. So,
right.
You know, again, all through interpretation, through language, which is a very Star Trekian way of looking at something, right? That's how I look at it.
There's a lot of stuff here that can be really fascinating. Like the word is a sound you make with your mouth. You associate it with a concept in your mind, and that's what gives it meaning. And in this case, he's trying to uncouple those two in order to cure it by replacing one sound with another meaning. But in order to get that meaning, he's got to make the sound, right? It's like you can't... I think I'm getting a zombie infection right now. Maybe that's what they were going for. It's like, you're trying to think too hard about this movie. You're going to just have to eat somebody's face off.
Run, that's for run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's smart. She's gone. Oh, shit. Okay, so they kiss because she manages to get cured. So they figure out that's the cure. They got to go back on the air, and the fucking doctor runs out the same window. Man, still not quite done, but he saves them, so they get back into the sound booth, and he lures the horde away so they can go on one last broadcast. And he's trying to figure out, okay, how can I do for the world what I did for Sid? And he just starts talking fucking nonsense, because then it's like you can sort of see the futility of what he's doing.
No, so he wasn't getting infected at this point, was he? He was coherent.
Wasn't.
He was coherent. Yeah, he was good, trying to save them. He was saying the same thing, correct me if I'm wrong, like kiss, kill, was it same thing, or?
That's kind of what he started with, and then he started experimenting. He would just like say a word, and then try to say something else, and then he sort of did like a weird thing with Sid. It's like he'd say a word, or she'd say a word, and then the other would just say some other nonsense word, right? Because they're trying to like help people disassociate. Replace this word with that word. If this is your trigger word, then this is going to be the word to save you, right? But ultimately, you can see how useless it is.
Like the writer was in a long-term relationship or married. It doesn't fucking matter what you say, you're fucked.
It doesn't matter what you say, you're screwed. The only word you can say is yes, or yes, dear. But usually yes, dear gets you in trouble. Yes is a better bet. We've all been there.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, good. See? So you hear gunshots outside, the military's there, they're broadcasting, telling them to cut the radio transmission. They keep going. They start counting down from 10. I guess they're going to bomb the place. And his famous last words, I'm still here, you cocksuckers. And with that, presumably the station explodes from some bomb, and that's the end.
Yeah. Too bad he should have yelled right at the end. It's a fake.
It's a fake, you cocksuckers!
Yeah. That's what he should have said.
That's what he should have said, exactly. We'll call him in for the director's cut. They can do that. Or when they do the big budget remake.
Yeah, the sci-fi remake. That's Garrick who dropped the bomb on the radio station.
That'd be great. So that's Pontypool. That was extremely difficult to discuss. But, alright, so let's talk about a couple things. So, we have a movie about language and the meaning of words wrapped up in what could have been a zombie thriller, I suppose. So how does that all fit together for you? Was that even a good idea to try to do all that?
I think it was a great idea. I mean, this is an indie movie. They're trying to do something radically different. You mentioned it went to the Toronto International Film Festival. So he's trying to be artistic about a twist on how our language could impact something of a tragic nature, which would be an apocalyptic event. So I found that somewhat interesting and fascinating. But in the end, this felt more like a Star Trek The Next Generation episode and not as good as the Darmok episode, where you're analyzing or you're looking at a language, trying to combine and trying to understand and have some similarity where, two groups of different people can come together, find some common ground. Here, it's just like you're trying to grasp at straws and see how language can impact our psyche. So I kind of went to the place where it was like the power of suggestion. How can something like that impact our mind and our mindset? Could it turn us against ourselves like that? Could it be used as a weapon? And I found that somewhat interesting, because where we look at warfare, we say, oh, it's biological warfare, physical warfare, or just typical warfare. Here it's something else where it's like, well, what about language? What about just a word? We talk about, what is it called? I can't think of the name. Alive in me, I've had too much to drink. What is it? Well, hypnosis? So if hypnosis is something where you're in a different state of being through suggestion, through instruction, could something similar trigger the end of times? And I think that's an interesting concept. The execution's a different story. So.
Yeah, it almost feels like they found a really interesting concept and didn't have either the money or the talent or both to really pull it off. They could scratch the surface of it, but they couldn't get into the meat of it because of the limitations of it. And I don't know, it would have been cool to see more tension, more horror elements here to bring it home, to use a cliche.
Well, it's right in between that. You want it to be horror, or do you want it to be about how language can trigger such an event? And it's a news story, and it's not picking.
Right, it's not picking one, and I think it's trying to do multiple layers, but it doesn't quite. The layers, if you're going to layer a movie up, they all really need to lock together very well. And in theory, they should, because it's a radio station, which means they're talking, which means that language, you can tie that in with all you've got is the language because it's a radio. It's not TV. It's not the internet. So all you have is the sound over the air. Man, there's a ton of things that you could layer in here, and it just, you got to make choices at the end of the day. You can't do everything. It's almost like they started to peel the onion and oh shit, there's a lot here. We can't do all of it. Where do you stop? But you don't want to let the really interesting threads go. So it was almost like they went down and took a sample of all of the layers that were there without actually exploring really deeply any of them all that well, right? So it was more breadth and not as much depth. So why don't you tell me your final thoughts and if this is a recommend for you, and is this a rare antiquity?
This is a tough one, because the concept is a rare antiquity, 100%, but the execution is a different story. You want to explore the concept of language and how that could impact the human psyche, how the brain works. Could that trigger an event, like a horrific event or a tragedy, or in this case, an apocalyptic event? I think that's a movie that needs to be done, and you've hit the nail on the head, Jeff, with some budget, with some real talent. I think that was the focus of this writer and director, but I just don't think he had the budget or the time or the talent to fulfill that vision. So the unfortunate reality is it's a no. It's not a rare antiquity. And if it's a zombie movie you're looking for, which what this is a zombie movie that's happening, but the zombie movie's happening in the background, which is so far back in the background, it has nothing to do with anything, almost. And while there's a couple of good scenes in there, creepy scenes, especially with the helicopter who's not an helicopter guy on the ground, Ken, describing some events, those are cool. That adds a little layer to the vibe of what's going on out there, and you can let your imagination run wild, and I did, and it was creepy and somewhat effective, but those moments are too few and far between. So anyone who's looking for this as a horror movie or a zombie movie, it's unique, but there's not enough there that will keep you entertained because the execution is not there. The tension is not there. The vibe is not there. This is not scary in the least in any which way. I was not at the edge of my seat. The acting is a mixed bag. I have to say, also it's a Canadian film. I want to really say they had a really good concept here, and I want to give it a recommend, even a mild one, but I just can't. I just don't think they hit the nail on the head. They were somewhat close. It was a great concept, a good idea. I liked the setting. You just needed to do something more with that than what you did. So I'd say no to both. Not a recommend, not a rare and tip.
Yeah, that's the problem, is I see so much missed potential. That's such a great concept. The setting, like the idea for the setting is great. I mean, there's so much here that you could work with. And I would have loved it if it was a little more robust, bigger budget, little more talent. I'm not saying anybody was involved here like shit the bed or anything like that. It just wasn't, I don't know, so much potential here, so much stuff that could have been great, and it just didn't have it. So yeah, it's not a rare antiquity for me either, and it's a damn shame because, man, there's some great concepts here. And as for a recommend, yeah, I think I'm with you on that as well. There's just not enough here as either a horror movie or a zombie movie or sort of an existential David Lynchian type of analysis of some weird idea. It doesn't really hit on anything. So they sort of salad bar it, little samples.
I love that, salad bar.
Doesn't quite get there. So I want to recommend it. As far as like Canadian films go, conceptually it's ambitious and they don't quite hit the mark. So it's too bad, but still glad to have puzzled over the meanings that are going on here. So yeah, we'll put this in the category of not quite there, but as is usually my favorite part of the episode, Harry, what the fuck do you have in store for us next time?
Well, for me, it's been a tough year. We haven't done the show as often as I would have liked. I think we've only done it, 3-4 times? If that?
I think this is our 4th episode this year. It's a shame.
So I feel like I need to get familiar again with at least 1/3 of my spirit animal again. So the itch is there. So I will go all the way back to September of this year, 2018, as we will look at Panos Cosmatos' film Mandy, starring Nicolas Cage.
Oh, I've been wanting to watch that.
Usually we go back in time here, but I've been hearing some interesting things about this movie, and I really want to see it. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm dying to watch this movie.
All right, yeah, contemporary show. I was thinking of some Nicolas Cage options too, actually, so this will be great.
Yeah, the Cage, his second appearance. It's far too few, but...
It's not his last, I can guarantee you that.
No, not at all.
Fantastic. All right, so Nicolas Cage action. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes. Yeah, I can't wait. I might watch it now.
We're just doing it right now.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, it's good to get back to the saddle, man, and I'm looking forward to some caginess.
Yes, I need it.
Right on. All right, we'll call that an episode, and we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds great. Can't wait.
All right, man.